All right. All right. Good afternoon. I understand that everybody's there, so I hope you enjoyed watching the film. I will go now to the participants' questions. So I don't know if there is audio coming back, or I just answered the text questions. Okay. First question, I will read it. Do you think this would work in a European village, say in a rurally declining area or an urban area? I would say that I think basic income would work in any kind of setting. So for sure, also in a European village. Of course, the amounts and the dynamics will be completely different. I suppose. I'm sure, but the fact that you give people in my opinion, the strength of a basic income, the floor that they don't sink in a survival mode and can foresee in their basic needs, and have the mental room to really have ownership of their own lives, is crucial. That's also what I tried to show in this film, which is the first film that shows basic income in action, where the people of the village itself, or at least that's what my goal was, to show what it means to have a basic income, but told by the people themselves. And it's of course also a kind of ode to humanity, and it gives also an insight in African life in a poverty situation. That's why it's that brings me to the other question that is here: the environmental impact of more building. That's a good question, but also kind of difficult one. First of all, the fact that they go to permanent houses, maybe I have to elaborate a bit on that. When you saw in the movie that they were removing the stones from the ground, it's like the area where this project took place is a volcanic area. So they remove those volcanic stones where they start constructing with. Of course, there is no proof, but I think it has its environmental impact as well, because by removing the stones, I suppose some parts of the grounds will be less good for agriculture, but I'm not sure of that. On the other hand, what you see is because the village lives very close to nature and the natural environment is that makes that they are very aware of changes in their environment. For example, on a bigger scale, climate change, where they, with the small village, cannot have an impact on the climate change as such, but they feel it because they live in the seasons, not the seasons as in Europe, but they have a rainy and a dry season. And normally their economic approach is always to the agricultural activities are forced or are driven by the rainy and the dry season. But because that is changing because of climate change, they are sometimes lost because of the fact that they don't know when they put the seeds in the ground compared to the past. Then another argument is that I have an expression in Dutch for it, but in English, it would be like it's also a bit of false argument to say that they have to stay in temporary houses, because permanent housing has
his hands and
on different kind of things. More fossil use in the village, not really. There was already one motorcycle. I think there was a second one coming in, but not more than that. There is also is there something? Okay, no, nothing wrong. Sorry, there was a message popping in. And so in that aspect, I think it's important that they have also the chance to develop themselves and have the capacity. What we maybe have to be aware of is that these amounts are quite small, but for them in that poverty situation, they make a big difference. They liberate them kind of out of their extreme poverty situations, which then ensures that they can decide for themselves what they really want. The question, why was there no financial literacy club to help people save or manage money offered? To state a bit boldly, do we in Europe also have to go to a financial literacy club if we receive social protection, like let's say child money or retirement money? I think in the end, the people, they live their own lives, so they know best what is best for them. The problem of poverty is that, in my opinion, that money is poverty is a money problem and not a character problem. So why was there no financial literacy? It's a strange question to me in a basic income setting, because it's unconditional. And what we saw was that they help each other. It's a learning process that works, in my opinion, best if it's done by the people themselves and that it's not done top down. The savings club is actually a saving group that they create themselves. Why you saw it with interest is because how it works, basically, 10 people, for example, they save a certain amount, let's say 50,000 shilling per month in one saving group. Those 10 people accumulate then each month 500,000 shilling. The result is that every 10 months, because there are 10 people, one of the 10 people can get 500,000 shilling to do a bigger investment, such as constructing a house or buying a cow or investing it in an extra land for agriculture. But what also happens is that they give the opportunity to people who have a urgent need, let's say, to get earlier money, but then there is a small interest of 2 to 3%, and depending on which agreements they made. The question about alcohol, what we see or what we saw, and also other international research suggests the same, is that there is, let's say, no impact. We are now doing the 5th village in Uganda, and starting in November with the 2nd one in Congo, but that's around living income and artisanal mining. And what we always see is that there is, let's say, no influence, or it stays the same, or there is a little drop. But let's say that the people that are alcoholic, they don't cure immediately from the alcoholism, and the other people that are not drinking don't start immediately drinking. So that is what we experienced there. So yeah, feel free to ask me more questions. I'm very ready to answer more questions.
Reading it now. Hi, Stephen. It's Greg Marston. I'm chairing. I've got a couple of questions I have also come through, if I can just ask them.
Right.
One was just about, I guess, in relation to the whole kind of ethics of being a filmmaker and making those very intimate portrayals of family life. Was any of that particularly challenging for you as a filmmaker?
What way you mean challenging?
I guess in terms of the ethics and of those people's lives and the moments of stress, particularly, for example, that distressing scene where the young infant died.
That's a good question. It's of course a struggle, but maybe it's important to highlight that, but that is not part of the film as such, is that we explained very well that we were going to film the process. The people that didn't want to be filmed word filmed, and it was also what we really spent there. That's the unique part about the film, I think. 2 to 3 years almost. Either it was me or it was my colleague. So that happened towards the end of the project. So after 2 years, so you are very close to them. Then you can ask me, why did you decide to put it in the film? Because I believe that filmmaking can have a lot of impact if it's moving. And I showed this film also on a big screen in the village last January. I wanted to do it earlier, but because of COVID, I couldn't travel to Uganda. But I showed it, and there were very enthusiastic, and the reactions were very nice. On the website, you can see also a small film about it where I captured some reactions. But to me, it's also an ode to humanity, the film I wanted to make. I wanted to show actually that people are everywhere the same, that we have our individual struggles, but that at the end, everybody is striving for happiness and has his own dreams, let's say.
Stephen, and another question was about, again, some of those accounts where you saw the young man who was saying that if he doesn't have further education, he won't be able to fulfill his dreams. And as you were saying, that's a kind of universal aspiration, and particularly around the transformative power of education. So the question is, in your opinion, and as a filmmaker, was the kind of basic income enough, or do you think that there needs to be an emphasis on services as well, and particularly services that people don't have to pay for, like education? What was your kind of view about the relationship between basic income and basic services?
That's a good question, a very complicated one in a way. I think first of all, we have to know that in Uganda, there are no social protections. I think it's a combination of two questions. First, I will try to elaborate on the fact we did it for 2 years. Personally, I believe it has to be universal, like UBI, Universal Basic Income. But why do we do the 2 years? Is that that's also based on international research that you have effects on after 2 years, and also the village dynamics change rapidly. In general, even in a rural area in Uganda, but for sure when you give an unconditional cash transfer or basic income for 2 years. So that means that there is a lot of movement. People go to the city, people go study, but also new families enter. If we would say, yeah, we allow the newcomers to be part of the village project, there will be a lot of people coming, and it will not be good for the people of the village themselves. So there are some reasons that we do it for 2 years. Of course, we have also limited budgets. We are a small organization, and by then we started with the 8 projects because as a filmmaker, I wanted to make the first film that shows basic income in action. Because of the success and the good results, there were more funds coming. So now we are doing the 5th village in Uganda, but still, the funds are not so extremely big. So the vision on that is that, yes, we want to do universal, but because of changing village dynamics and other reasons, another reason is actually that it's not kind of economically fair for neighboring villages, because you give then a complete big advantage to one village and not to the other ones. And what we mainly want to do is inspire more and more organizations within development aid to think about cash transfers, because a lot of money is wasted, I'm convinced, and I'm sure, in development aid, while basic income is a very effective method to deliver directly to people that are mostly in, let's say, almost every situation in development aid not reached, because the people in extreme poverty are often illiterate, cannot speak English, cannot communicate with donors or bigger organizations. That's another reason.
Stephen, yeah, it was interesting the dynamics you showed in the film around the way in which money was invested and what the returns are. It would be interesting to see what happens down the track, I guess, in terms of the multiplier effects of that investment, and also that dynamic you spoke about just then about some villages and individuals being excluded from the trial, and the way in which that played a little bit of havoc, I guess, in relation to village-to-village relations, which there's a question which might reflect that, but one of the questions that's come through is your thoughts about the title. What was the kind of basis for calling the film Crazy Money?
Because it's a good anecdote. Because I'm convinced, and I'm still convinced, that up to today, most people think it's a crazy idea to give money without conditions, to do a basic income, let's say. It was also the first reaction that we got when me and Martin, my colleague, my companion, wanted to start this project. And then we decided, after a long process, to call the film Crazy Money, because it's not crazy, but we want to put the emphasis on the fact that a lot of people don't believe in the fact that people can decide for themselves.
Right, and some of the parallels that also occurred to me that come back through a question as well is just thinking about what happens after the 2 years. So one of the questions was about, the Siwa trial in Madhya Pradesh in India, for example. Was that part of your thinking in designing the study, looking at what happened there? Because again, there was about what happens after 2 years when the money's withdrawn and so on. But do you feel that there's parallels between that experience in India and documented in this village in Uganda?
I read the book of Sarah Davella and Guy Stanning. I don't know 100% if I'm going to answer this question correctly. But what I maybe first want to say, we very well declared in the beginning that it was only for 2 years. So a lot of people, most people actually, they took that into account. So they saved, and what I know from the results from the university, because we also do an impact study afterwards, after 1 year, but the results are not yet published because the university is still working with the data. It will come in the following weeks, and we will for sure share it also on our channel and our social media. But what we see now what I also saw in January when I was there 2 years after the project is that there is a kind of dynamic that is not stopping. Of course, the investment rate dropped a bit, and some people didn't develop much more, but the investments that are made, like let's say land, permanent housing is a very big benefit when it comes to health and many other things, which is also proven in the Sustainable Development Goals, that permanent housing or good housing is very important. What we also see is that the happiness, which is for me a good indicator for the life satisfaction and the mental space or the mental room that they acquired, stays, I was surprising for myself also, the same as 1 year before. But when you see the story in the film, because I decided to capture those 3 stories as the main stories, but of course there were 60 stories, and if you would see my film rushes, it was 20 terabyte of material, but I wanted to design this because it reflected the most, and I can, from a scenario perspective, explain why I chose those stories. For example, Stanley, who says 1 year later that he will not continue to study, is also a moment. For the moment, he is now working, but at that moment, they just lost their house 1 year later, which was an external event, which had nothing to do with the basic income as such. It was an external event that happened to that household. What we saw, what Idreda told us ourselves, is that they were much more resilient, that they were much more strong, and she's now just living in another place, in another spot.
What your film highlights is that that security and risk are kind of two sides of the same coin, but also resilience, as you were just saying, that if you give people a basic level of economic security, that it enables them to withstand some of those external shocks a little bit better, but also crisis events that are unpredictable, as you said. Was there anything else that surprised you? You said you collected lots of story, lots of video. Anything else that surprised you as a filmmaker?
Yeah, there are many stories that happened. To pick one or two in particular, for me, the general feeling is maybe that everybody became suddenly very entrepreneurial, but not entrepreneurial like always in business, but they really started dreaming. And also, what always touches me maybe the most is what you saw at the end of the film, but it always happens in every village that we do. Is that but now by the way, we also, that's maybe another thing that's important. It was also a learning process for us, because the first village, you could very well see that I did the speech myself, but now the teams in Uganda are just Ugandans that are enrolling it. But what we see when we enroll, like at the end of the film, the people are really so excited, and it's an excitement that is it's combined with the kind of a disbelief, because mostly the first question that always pops up is, when do we have to pay it back? How much interest do we need to pay on that money? So from the moment they realize that it's true, because they never receive such kind of social protection like we have in Europe, but also other projects, because they all know of the let's say the NGO projects that are available in the area, but they can never benefit directly from it, and they have almost no impact on them. So when they get that opportunity, that chance to say like, I'm really free to decide for myself what to do with the money. That was for me the most amazing part of it. And also it's reflected in the research that the life satisfaction drastically improved. And that's personally for me, I believe that when you feel good or when you feel happy, I don't mean the American way of feeling happy, but when you feel balanced in your life, that's like the foundation to take the good decisions and to develop for real. So I would say that are my most important things. But you have also in the beginning, for sure, the first 6 months, there are a lot of stories that appear that we are from the Illuminati, that we are witchcraft, that we're going to steal everybody's land, because for them it's so hard to believe that they just get the money, let's say, for free, without conditions, that they think, there must be something behind it.
It was really interesting how that came through, and that you were able to sort of illustrate over time how some of those fears were managed and challenged. But that point you were just making about the kind of entrepreneurship, as you said, it was only individual but also collective, the way in which people were pooling resources, making decisions. And again, that's got similarities with the trials that were conducted in India, the way in which people would pool monies to make decisions that would benefit for the whole village, not just individual households. So it was quite empowering to see that coming through. Stephen, we don't have any more questions on the coming through at the moment on the Q&A. Is there any final reflections you want to leave us with before we let you go and on with the rest of your day?
I see there are more questions. I don't know if I answered them. But do you mean with Madhya Pradesh revisit? That's the Indian experiment you were talking about. The India project of Tharat and Guy Standing, right?
Yeah, that's the one that we were talking about before.
Yeah, I revisited. I don't know. I think there are many of those projects going on, and I think the more and more, what is maybe also interesting to say is that Crazy Money, the film, but also the Aid project, also influenced the policy here in Belgium, so that unconditional cash transfers are now a part of the development aid official program. Not yet everywhere, but it's already acknowledged. Why was this particular village selected? That's a long story. But let's say that we selected the area of Western Uganda, Fort Portal, and in that area we researched different villages. Why we chose Buzibi is because it is a village that is surrounded by a swamp. It's a kind of an island, so it's kind of a community on its own, not only as a village but also geographically. And on top of that, it was also a very remote area within, and they were only 7 kilometers away from the bigger city. So that made it all very interesting, according to us, to take this particular village. What I wanted to also elaborate a bit on the collective action extra is that they really work together is also one of the amazing things. The saving groups that occur, the fact that they group themselves towards their local government to receive the road. I got now signals that they also receive water and electricity supply in the coming months and years. So it's a mechanism that is not stopping.
That's right, and the way in which the mission, I think, really illustrates the way in which people get on, rather than a kind of ethic of competition, which we tend to celebrate much more in the West. We're just coming up to time now, Stephen, so I wasn't going to ask you any more questions other than to thank you for making the film available and for making time to discuss the film itself. And I think your film illustrates the power of that medium in terms of education, the benefits around basic income and how transformative it can be. So we appreciate, as I said, you making the time and the film available for the Basic Income Congress this year. Thanks very much.
All right, it's my pleasure. Have a good Congress and see you maybe next time.
Next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.